A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. John Kennedy Toole, he's an author who killed himself before the recognition of this book came out, and in so doing joined the category of artists who committed suicide before the recognition of their art was ever discovered, that was ever actualised. And his like we all know so well, you know, the Van Gogh of the world, and we've got the Herman Melville of the world, you know, the poignant image of Herman Melville in his deathbed surrounded by unread, unsold copies of Moby Dick. And here we have another in the league of tragedy, John Kennedy Toole. Now, I wanted just to say that about him first of all, because there was a wee interesting note to be made, and that was after his death, this book was brought to light through his mother, who brought the book to a publisher and insisted that they read it. They had no idea who John Kennedy Toole was. They were reluctant to read it, but through the mother's insistence, they did, and realised it wasn't just a decent book, it was a great book. And one they could, well, I don't know if they gave any money to the mother, but they might have had wee dollar signs in their eyes as well, realising that their author was passed. But anyway, that is notable only because in this book, the main character, I would say, although he's in a series of characters described as a Confederacy of Dunces, his mother is totally and absolutely unaware, really, of his writing, what it is he's writing about, and in fact she can barely read. She can barely read, as it's read to us at some bit. When she tries to read out loud, it takes her ages, and the main character is exasperated. And I just thought that was an interesting little play there, after the fact of John's death, that his actual mother was the one to bring his writing to light, and was only far too aware of its merit. But anyway, let me get on to the book itself. So, although this book is definitely a comedy, one of the main intrigues of the book is the self-proclaimed impressive worldview of Ignatius C. Reilly, our intelligent but unwitting mixture of antagonist and protagonist in one. Now, he writes this worldview of his on parchment paper on what he describes as big chief tablet, giving it some sense of importance, like the commandments were written on tablet, you know, that kind of thing. And funnily enough, having just scaled this mountainous scree, don't know if I'm getting that in shot there, but having came down that yesterday, with only a couple of chapters left to read of this book, I realised that I didn't have any paper to write my notes on, and I wrote my notes on toilet roll, which is another wee play. Anyway, where to begin of Ignatius C. Reilly, our main character's worldview? Let's first of all we have to say that Ignatius he's a horrible guy. He's despicable. He's gross. He's cruel, often. But his worldview, we have to say, and his private, very perverted commentary on his American situation, it does indeed have some perverted and philosophically notable logic to it. And in so, this book is elevated from comedy. It's more than that. It's definitely a comedy. Half the characters are walking around in literal costumes, wearing bowling shoes and pirate outfits as he's selling hot dogs. It's a comedy and it's funny. But for me, the main intrigue of the book comes from the commentary on society, which is perverted but intriguing. Especially when it's concerned with race, with politics. Now, I'll go on. I'll carry on here. I enjoyed Ignatius C. Riley's. It was a characterization of Fortuna, who personifies the chaos of the book, and there is chaos in the book. There's wild chaos, but it's characterized as this kind. It does feel like there's some design to it, which there is, of course. It's a written thing. There's a bit of self-awareness there, but I enjoyed that self-awareness. I'll say also that John Kennedy Toole has, in this book, successfully written from the perspective of a black character, Jones, who describes himself as an unskilled vagrant, but this self-demeaningness, or I don't know the words of it, but John successfully doesn't write this character in a demeaning sense. He pays heed to the black struggle while writing about a character who has no skills, is in poverty, is thrown in jail sometimes, and whatever else. A dangerous game he played, but he pulled it off, I would say. And the book was good. I will say that if you were to divide it into 3 acts, the second act that's where the most comedy comes from, where the first and the third act would give the elevated sense of meaning comes from the first and the third act of the book, where Fortune's wheel spins all of these mad characters into circumstances that eventually just erupt into perverted chaos. But it's enjoyable to read. And I will say also, it's not his fault, John Kennedy Toole, but I won't read more like it after this. I intend, now that I'm writing my own novel, I'm going to read authors that I want to be like, and John Toole doesn't fall into that category. I'll read a wee bit from his book now to give you a sense of what it is I'm talking about before I close this review. This is page 120 of my copy. I don't know what copy you've got, but you'll find it if you read it. Right. Characteristic of almost all of America's art, any connection between American art and American nature is purely coincidental. But this is only because the nation as a whole has no contact with reality. That is only one of the reasons why I have always been forced to exist on the fringes of its society, consigned to the limbo reserved for those who do not know reality when they see it. I have never seen cotton growing, and have no desire to do so. The only excursion of my life outside of New Orleans took me through the vortex to the whirlpool of despair. Baton Rouge. In some future instalment, a flashback, I shall perhaps recount that pilgrimage through the swamps, a journey into the desert from which I returned broken physically, mentally and spiritually. New Orleans is, on the other hand, a comfortable metropolis which has a certain apathy and stagnation which I find inoffensive. At least its climate is mild too. It is here in the Crescent City that I am assured of having a roof over my head and a Dr. Nut in my stomach, although certain sections of North Africa have from time to time excited my interest. The voyage by boat, however, would probably invenerate me, and I am certainly not perverse enough to attempt air travel, even if I were able to afford it. Anyway, he goes on to describe the factory in which he works as being somehow full of, the black factory workers. The factory is a large barn-like structure that houses bolts of fabric, cutting tables, massive sewing machines and furnaces that provide the stream for pressing. The total effect is rather surreal, especially when one sees les Africains moving about, attending to their tasks in this mechanised setting. The irony involved caught my fancy, I must admit. Something from Joseph Conrad sprang to my mind, although I cannot seem to remember what it was at the time. Perhaps I likened myself to Kurtz in the Heart of Darkness, when far from the trading companies and offices in Europe, he was faced with the ultimate horror. I do remember imagining myself in a pith helmet and white linen jodhpurs, my face enigmatic behind a veil of mosquito netting. He goes on for a while after that to describe the social justice of releasing these black workers from their employment and convincing them that they deserve better, and also acknowledging that they are themselves and their desires for better employment confused, and they're understanding their stage in the American system as only a cog in the machine, which is really nothing to admire, and their ambitions to move up in the machine are only perversions in themselves, aspiring to be like the bourgeoisie. Nobody in their right mind should aspire to be the bourgeoisie in Ignatius's worldview. And so you see that there is a kind of like twisted logic to it, but one that Ignatius's own arrogance can't set free. Here, in the last of the book, when we are realising that his soulmate, if there ever could be such a thing, is wanting to set him free, who can recognise his mind as something special, she says, I can't find the pages. Stupid of me to start this without knowing that, but she says that she's saving his mind. She can't believe what his mind is going to turn to once she's dusted away the cobwebs. And Ignatius himself looks out of the window disinterestedly, convinced that he's already enlightened. This book was good. I'll give it 3.5 stars out of 5 stars. And I'm glad to have added it to the collection of the anthology in my head. you know, of all the books I've read. Leave it there. Come to New Zealand. It's fucking pretty here.